let's go ahead and jump right into our discussion on helping students with college and career readiness during a pandemic. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce our panel of experts here. We'll start with Dr. Laura Owen, the Executive Director of the Center for Equity and Post-Secondary Attainment at San Diego State University. Dr. Owen served as the inaugural director of the Center for Post-Secondary Readiness and Success at American University, a prior urban school counselor and district counseling supervisor. Her research focuses on bridging K through 12 and higher ed, and more specifically evaluating the impact of interventions and programs designed to address the persistent equity and access issues that too many students across the country face. Dr. Owen co-led the SDSU White House convening in 2014, focused on strengthening school counseling and college advising, and also assisted with the American University White House convening in 2016. That addressed culturally appropriate career counseling and college advising resources and practices that must be available to students. The convenings called for renewed attention and evaluation of practices and interventions that create post-secondary pathways for all students, especially students living in poverty and first in their family, to attend college. Welcome, Dr. Owen. We are thrilled to have you. Next, we have Dr. Eric Hines. Dr. Hines is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Psychology and Learning Systems at the Florida State University, as well as the coordinator of the Counselor Education Program and School Counseling Track. Dr. Hines prepares graduate students to be professional school counselors. His research agenda centers around college and career readiness for African-American males, parental involvement and its impact on academic achievement for students of color, and improving and increasing post-secondary opportunities for first-generation, low-income and students of color, particularly African-American males. Additionally, his research interests include career exploration in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. For students of color, Dr. Hines has secured research funding to study the college readiness and persistence of African-American males to improve their academic and career outcomes. Further, Dr. Hines has worked on several grants aimed at increasing awareness of STEM careers for students of color and rural students. Welcome, Dr. Hines. Thrilled to have you. And then last but certainly not least is Dr. Dwayne Gregg. Dr. Gregg works for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission and currently serves as the project director for Gear Up Tennessee. Prior to being the project director, he spent 6 years as the East Tennessee regional coordinator for Gear Up Tennessee, and he has additional experience as an Upward Bound director, educational talent search counselor and coordinator, college professor, academic advisor, juvenile justice counselor, and small group facilitator. Dwayne holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Florida, Master of Public Admin from the University of Tennessee, and a doctorate in higher education admin from the University of Memphis. Welcome, Dr. Gregg. We are thrilled to have you as well. And then my name is Jason Johnson. I'm the lucky one that gets to moderate most of these, and it's my great honor to do so. Many of you know my background is I'm a school psychologist. I came from public ed before I came over to the world of the WhyTry organization about 5 years ago. And we specialize in delivering social emotional learning and resilience material to organizations throughout the country. And that's who's with you. So let's start. I'm going to go ahead and take the spotlights off now. And I want to get right into our discussion. We're going to try to go for about an hour today, like we typically do. And there we go. I want to get right into it with some questions. First question I would love to hear from our panelists is just have you talk a little bit about some of your recent work in supporting students or counselors as they move towards college and career readiness and post-secondary opportunities. And I was wondering maybe if we could, let's start with Dr. Gregg, then go Dr. Owen, and then Dr. Hines. Dr. Gregg, tell us a little bit about what you've been working on.
Sure, just a little bit of background for Gear Up, because I know that people are coming from different walks of life here. So working for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission as the director of Gear Up Tennessee, Gear Up is a federally funded program as part of the U.S. Department of Education. It's a 7-year grant with a focus on preparing middle school and high school students for college to enroll and to succeed in college. Primarily, the focus is on those underserved at-risk populations, whether it's low-income, first-generation, minority students, students with disabilities, and things like that. Across the state of Tennessee, we provide direct services to about 7,000 students each year. So we have usually a hybrid model. So we have a cohort that we started working with in 7th grade, working with those students up and through their first year of college. And then we also serve these same high schools. We have 17 high schools across the state of Tennessee that we provide direct service to, that we are serving the senior class each year. So in addition to those direct services, we have about 55 seniors across the state of Tennessee that we provide resources for what we call Path to College events, such as College App Week, FAFSA Frenzy events, College Signing Day, College Planning Nights for students and families. We have a website, a portal for college and career research. We also are in charge of what we call the transcript exchange for high schools and colleges in Tennessee to use to send transcripts back and forth. And then kind of overall, we provide probably the best source in the state of overall college and career resources that we make available on different websites and media and things like that for school counselors as well as students and families to be able to use. Our day-to-day activities at a lot of our sites are just kind of those typical college and career readiness things: counseling, mentoring, tutoring, campus visits, things that we've done this year, but I know we'll talk about a little later that some of those things have looked very different this year than they would in a typical year, but we still had to find ways to do career exploration or to do campus visits and those types of things, or some of those one-on-one meetings that you would like to do in person have been virtual and everything. But that's kind of the typical types of services and things that we've done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Owen.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to join you here for a little while this afternoon. My name is Laura Owen, and I am the director for a new center at San Diego State, the Center for Equity and Post-Secondary Attainment. And I would say that a lot of my work really since the pandemic started was when I started to see what was happening with my colleagues, first with higher ed faculty who were trying to shift very quickly last spring from a face-to-face model to a virtual model. And I think I put my district director hat on and I saw the crisis that everyone was in at that moment. And all I could think of was, oh my goodness, what's going to happen in K-12 schools who have much larger caseloads, and immediately started thinking, well, as a center director, what can I do? How can I help? So I've spent the bulk of my time really since the pandemic started putting together resources, trying to get them out into the field, participating in webinars, and really trying to look at what's happening for us nationally as well as more locally around the pandemic, and especially when it comes to the area of post-secondary advising, which I believe will be the critical link to push us into a post-pandemic recovery space. What can we do to really help practitioners who are overwhelmed now, who are wearing so many different hats? And what I fear will be, and maybe it's the crisis hat again back on my head, is in a mode of needing to put out fires and dealing with crisis situations, and a little bit worried because we're hearing that there's some real challenges to try to get to any of the post-secondary work right now. And so my focus has really been, what can we do for the field? How can we get resources provided? I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's where I've put the bulk of my attention since the pandemic started.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Dr. Hines, tell us a little bit about what you've been working on.
Greetings, everyone. Again, my background is I'm an associate professor here at Florida State University in the Counselor Education program, in which we house 3 different counseling tracks: career counseling, clinical mental health counseling, and school counseling. So my research also is looking at how to ensure that Black males are college and career ready, as well as looking at closing the opportunity gaps and STEM exploration, as Jason said earlier. So what I've been doing in my role is that we just recently relaunched our school counseling program to a full-time, not a full-time, excuse me, a part-time online, fully online format here. And we've been actually uh, redesigning and actually innovating our curriculum to adjust to the pandemic. So this is our first year as an online school counseling program. Quick plug, if you want to go into school counseling, check us out, www.fsu.edu. So a lot of our students this semester and last semester, we've been actually talking about what will it look like to be out in the schools during the pandemic and then post-pandemic. So a lot of our conversation have been around not only just college and career readiness and preparation for students to think about life after high school and think about their life in general, but what are we doing as pre-service school counselors now to really learn and understand how to adjust to our students? I think it's one thing that we always say our students need to adjust to us, but during the pandemic, there are a lot of issues that are happening. So for my pre-service school counselors, we talk about what does neighborhood look like? What does the context, what do resources look like in different neighborhoods in which our students live in? And then when they have to come to school and deal with those same issues during the coronavirus. And so part of that is the other focus is that we look at how to really work in urban and rural settings. And as we all know that those two opposites are the ones that need the most resources. So we talk about what does it look like to prepare students for college and career readiness in a rural school setting? What does it look like in an urban school setting? So all of these conversations are occurring, and we actually have an urban and rural schools course now in which we talk about, so what's going on in real time in the media? What does some of the reports that we get from the American School Counseling Association, from Education Trust, from the College Board, and how do we infuse this in the curriculum and what we traditionally have to learn as professional school counselors?
Awesome. Thank you. And that's, I think, a great lead in to where I want to go next. It's been kind of interesting, and I guess not a complete surprise, but the discussions of late as we've talked with different different kind of experts on these webinars that we've had have talked a lot about how the challenges that we have that seem really, really difficult right now, really exacerbated during the pandemic, really are a reflection of a lot of cases of things that have been bubbling under the surface for quite some time. And now the pandemic has really brought more exposure and more attention to them. But in a lot of cases, these have been ongoing challenges that we haven't addressed effectively yet. So in all of my individual conversations with all three of you, you've all mentioned at different times the challenge and the importance to you of trying to take care of our most vulnerable and underserved students. And in many cases, they've been impacted the most by the pandemic. So as we think about things like equity and college access and success in general, however we define that, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you've done or what you recommend to specifically support these students, and what are some ideas for our webinar attendees to help better support some of these students that are particularly vulnerable or underserved. And I was wondering, maybe we're going to change up the order on this one just a little bit. Maybe if we could go Dr. Owen, Dr. Hines, and then Dr. Gregg.
Sure. I'm going to share a couple of slides, just really quick with the group here. I think that this might sort of highlight for us what some of the issues are. And I won't spend a lot of time on research just because I'm a research geek, but I'm also a practitioner. So I'll try to make this not too researchy, but I would really encourage you, if you haven't seen this or aren't aware of it, the National Student Clearinghouse has a research center, and they put out some really excellent research. They recently published the high school benchmarks report, which is really looking at the impact of COVID. And I think we've just talked about it, but I wanted to highlight it. You know, nationally, we're looking at a 20% decrease in college enrollment from 2019 to fall 2020. That's shocking in and of itself. But when you break it down and you look at our high poverty schools, there's a decrease of 33%. And then when you look at it for high minority schools, a decrease of 26%. And then if you break it down by every category and you compare higher income schools to lower income schools, high poverty to low poverty, high minority to low minority, and then you look at rural, suburban, and urban, you can see that there's been drops, but they're much more significant when we look at the lower income, the lower poverty, the high minority, and the urban and rural setting. And one of the things that's been surprising to folks is actually, where is this happening? The largest decreases that we're seeing are actually community college enrollment. Next is our private universities, and then our 4-year. Same thing again. If you take a look at this and you break it down and you compare it to low income schools to higher income schools, you see that the decrease is so much more significant in our lower income schools. So we're alarmed by this. We've had, a couple of decades, at least 15 years of trying to close the opportunity gap. It's probably been wiped out in less than 8 months. And all indications are that the class of 2021 is even a more significant drop. So we're really concerned about that. I thought I'd share just like 2 things, what we're doing. One of the things that we've tried to do is to develop some CEU courses for school counselors. So we're offering 2 CEU courses right now, one in Foundations of Equity that's really focused on what does it look like if we're gonna address some of the issues around implicit bias and the conscious and unconscious ways in which we internalize racism and we perpetuate it in our work, is specifically around college and career advising. What does that mean? What do I need to change as a practitioner? How do I interact and work with my students? How do I understand that there was a system that was designed and built for them not to be successful? Do I know how to advocate in that system for policy change? That course, both of these courses are 25 hours, and I can tell you more if you want to know about it later. We also have an advanced topics course, and this is designed specifically to address COVID. So to bring in really what's happening around COVID, how can we help both pre-service and in-service counselors to think about that work. So I will stop sharing and pass it on to the next person.
And if you have a link for that, Laura, feel free to put that in the chat tool. I'm guessing people will be interested in that.
Okay.
Let's see. Dr. Hines, you're up.
Yes. So to answer your question, and I'm going back to what I was saying earlier, how we were preparing pre-service school counselors, which I also believe could be applicable to our in-service educators here on our webinar today. First, what we're doing is preparing our pre-service counselors to understand the needs of their student population. Some of our students are actually practicing school teachers, so we talk a little bit about that as well, and also how to identify the issues that are impacting their students, such as anxiety during post-secondary planning, and not just anxiety coming from our students and stress about what it will look like during COVID-19 to go to college. I know some of the schools are coming back in the fall face-to-face. So we've been talking about those considerations. Should I even go off to school? What would that look like? I may be immune compromised, or my student may be immune compromised. How do I help them navigate that space if they decide to go to a college that needs to go back face-to-face? So that's something that we talk about. We also have been talking about looking at students who want to take a gap year because they think they can't afford college, or maybe they need to stay home with their families. I know for a lot of our ELL and our students with Latinx backgrounds that I've been working with, they've been saying that, that might be a possibility that Dr. Hines, I have to stay home, or my students are saying that their students may have to stay home and help with families because of job loss, because of the economic downturn. So we're really having deep conversations about what that looks like. How do we talk to parents to ensure that they know that their kids can still go to school? Or how do we talk about it on a part-time basis, or maybe starting off at a vocational or VOTEC school or trade, and then working their way going to college. So different pathways so that students know that college is still accessible even during the pandemic and post pandemic. And also, we don't really talk about this too. A lot of our students, when we talk about college and career readiness, students in K-12, for a lot of reasons, whether it's disengagement or stress or virtual learning or kind of the social distancing, some schools don't look normal. So it can cause sudden grade changes. So we may have students who are doing well and all of a sudden something is happening in their lives and we're thinking that, oh, they're destined for this top rate school or they can afford, they have the requirements to go to this college. And all of a sudden grades may change, particularly in math and science. So how do we understand what students are going through? How do we work through that? How do we help them turn the grades around or look at the system, as Dr. Owen said, what is our system doing to our students or the environment to ensure that we can help them get back on the right track? I'll mention one more for the sake of time. The other piece that we've been talking about is during COVID, there are multiple ways that we need to be reaching our parents and our students. So we've been training our counselors to use social media outlets like Twitter. I have an assignment where my students have to tweet. They have to talk about real world events regarding education. And same with in-service educators, maybe using Twitter, making sure that our websites are up to date and we can have a lot of other social media outlets like Instagram or TikTok to convey messages around college and career readiness. We know our kids love TikTok, they love Instagram. My wife uses Instagram for her students too, as well as Twitter, so and Snapchat. So thinking about innovative ways to get the message out that of what parents need and what students need for college and career planning. And I'll stop right there. I have a few more that I could talk about, but I'll yield my time to Dr. Greg.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. That's great information. Dr. Greg.
Sure. I wanted to start out by thanking Dr. Owen, talking about the National Student Clearing House, because one of the first things that we did along with from the state level was to share all of our high schools in order to make an awareness about the inequities. We shared with them for their particular school what their college going rates look like, their FAFSA rate, their college application rates, not just as a school in total, but then broken down by race, broken down by ethnicity, broken down by the amount of money for those who were Pell eligible and those students that were not. And what that it brought such an awareness and shock to many of them was those inequities, and then started highlighting those gaps. Several of them, when they just looked at their overall, say, college going rate for their high school, they were really pleased. When they looked at the difference between what it may be for black students compared to white students, or those who were Pell eligible to those who were not, then it was shocking and kind of put a different light on everything. So that was kind of the first thing we did, kind of shine a light on those things and make sure that they were aware of it. One of the things that we've done specifically this year during the pandemic at the school level, it's kind of sought first to understand with that. So instead of just assuming that if someone was not coming to a meeting, it wasn't because a not meeting for parents. It wasn't just because they didn't want to come or they don't care about their kids. So find out why they were not coming. Do they have a part-time job that they're working at night, or they don't have transportation or types of things like that? Was it an issue with food? Was it they had childcare issues? Rather than just kind of making that automatic assumption or blame or shame or something that sometimes we tend to jump to. And then the next step to that was, once we find out what the root of the problem is, and again, it could be so many different things. Maybe it's the students needing tutoring or mentoring or whatever it may be, and figure out how we can solve that issue. Is it a textbook they need? Is it the technology? I can tell you from our standpoint here at Tennessee, we have spent tens of thousands of dollars this year purchasing computers, purchasing hotspots. When everyone is virtual and they're at home and you don't have a laptop, or where you live, you don't have internet access and everything's online, you can't function, you can't work. For that same reason, we had some of our school coordinators that were delivering to homes or allowing drop-offs at community centers. So there was ways to get them those types of materials and those kinds of things they needed this year. A couple other things I wanted to to focus on just real briefly, one of the things I just mentioned is the school coordinator. So we have someone that's embedded in all of these high schools that we work with in Tennessee. And we feel like that is often just kind of the key to our success, is that we have a caring, compassionate adult for each of these students. Usually it's a much better student to adult ratio. Sometimes we do have a school counselor, so they're able to supplement that work and build those relationships with the students and the family. And just that just is so important. The next part about that is when we're talking about college going, to so many students and parents, college going means traditional four-year school. And to us, that is not the case. There's some absolutely wonderful two-year schools, trade, vocational schools, and things like that. So just to make them aware of other opportunities that are out there, and then the goals and the steps and the timelines and things that they need to be on to get to those places if that's part of what they want to do. The last thing I would mention that has just been so important this year is helping students develop self-efficacy and resilience. And some of that has absolutely been through some things that we've done with WhyTry, but just not only during the pandemic where it's been exacerbated, but we know that our students going from high school to college are going to just run into lots of challenges, things that they've never faced before. And especially some of our minority students, our first gen, our lower income students are the ones who are going to, we got them to the place they're going to go to college. And then one semester, 2 semesters later, something happens and they drop out. And that's what we want to prevent and work on while we kind of still got them in a high school environment to train them that way.
Thank you. Yeah, this is important stuff. I want to hear now, and I think this is one of the things people are going to be really, really interested that they've shown up for. I was wondering if you could all tell us a little bit about some of the services and strategies that you specifically recommend or have maybe even implemented or helped implement during the pandemic to help prepare students for post-secondary opportunities. And for this one, let's go Dr. Hines, Dr. Gregg, and then Dr. Owen.
Okay. I am going to share my screen really quickly. Let me see if I can show the slideshow. Okay. So, I think when we talk about some of the aspects of COVID-19 and the pandemic, I think we also, in post-secondary readiness, we also have to talk about how are we meeting the needs of our students from a culturally responsive perspective. And that means how are we ensuring that our curriculum, whether we're in the classroom or school counselors, are culturally responsive? How are we connecting what students want to do, their aspirations, whether they want to go to a college, whether they want to go to vocational school or the world of work, is connected to what they're learning. I believe that these are one of the ways that we can continue to engage our students in the K-12 space in their work during COVID-19 when we talk about post-secondary readiness. And these are the conversations that I've been having with my students as well. And the other piece is that how do we talk with parents, give parents the knowledge and resources they need to help their children during a pandemic. And it's not just about, okay, we know that they need college and career resources to help them make decisions, but also how are we helping parents or giving them the resources to deal with the mental health issues that come along with college planning, career planning? How are we ensuring that they know that there are other mental health resources out in the community that they can use should their student need to see a counselor, and that school counselors also play a role in helping students process the career and college planning, even when things are happening, as I said earlier, about transitions. The other piece that I would recommend is that all of us on this call, we have a college degree, or and some of us have even gone to trade school. How do we talk to our students as often as possible about college and career readiness? How do we infuse it in everyday conversations? We as educators are really the front line in terms of talking about our experiences about going to college, even applying to college, and what that looked like and what are our experiences like before. And I think that will give some ease to some of the students who are applying, and talking to our parents who may not have gone to college and their students may be first generation as well. And then The other piece around college and career readiness, especially when we talk about Black and Brown students, is how do we be culturally responsive in our approach? Some of our students are virtual and then some of them are in class. And because of the pandemic, they've been impacted in different ways. So they may exhibit behaviors, particularly if we think about Black males and we think about brown students, Latinx students, as well as Black girls that may seem to be more defiant. Like they may put their head down. Well, they may put their head down, but that doesn't mean that they're not listening, right? So we may take that as a disrespectful behavior or act of defiance, and we end up adultifying them, meaning that we're treating them as an adult and we want to quickly penalize them as opposed to really understanding the context and the story behind the student and why they're doing this. The same with virtual school. We see some students who are being penalized, suspended, or being told to log off because of different behaviors. And these tend to be Black and Brown students. And we're not really understanding the nature of how the pandemic might even be impacting their family and even themselves. I've known little kids that I've talked to personally, and even my children. Children like, oh, I don't like school. I don't want to be in school right now because of this pandemic. So being frustrated, and then you hear responses from teachers like, well, they're not listening. They should have done their work. They should have taken responsibility. Well, when you say they should have taken responsibility, they're still kids. So we're putting that adultification language on them. And so with that, I would say that a lot of us, for pre-service and in-service educators, examining our biases and examining our beliefs and really still understanding that all of us are under stress. And I have great respect for our educators because some of them are doing dual roles, teaching in person and then teaching virtually at the same time. But also, how do we have that same grace and mercy and compassion for a lot of our students of color who may not have the resources, whether physically, financially, or even mentally, to continue to persist, which again, that can lead to learning loss, and that can also lead to disengagement and wanting to pursue post-secondary aspirations because they're figuring out, how can I get through K-12 when I can't, I mean, how do I get through post-secondary when I can't even get through K-12 without being penalized? So that's one PowerPoint that I would want to say for recommendations. And then when we talk about Black males, working with Black males, the other piece I want to say, since this is my research, providing more resources around the subjects of math and science, that's even critical now in the pandemic. I've worked with Black males in a learning community setting and higher education. One of the things that I noticed, and I've seen, that a lot of them are interested in either STEM related or STEM careers. And sometimes they get disengaged because they don't have the resources, or they didn't think about math and science in a way that it would take a little more time to excel in it. So then how do we beef up those resources? How do we also provide alternatives to disciplines such as restorative justice and eliminate out of school suspension, especially when it comes to virtual schools? How do we get rid of that? Because again, out of school suspension, they're not learning loss, they get disengaged, and they're disidentifying with school because they see school as more of a penalizing institution as opposed to an institution to learn and an institution that will embrace them. The other part is that we have high expectations. That's great. We all expect the best of our students. And I even think that teachers who are doing this, some of them are well-meaning, but don't understand the background and context of Black males. So how do we examine our biases and our beliefs and the narratives that have been given to us of what we've seen about Black males or even what we experience? How do we make sure those stereotypes do not play a role in how we engage and treat our Black men? So in other words, how do we believe that Black men are, or Black males and Black boys are brilliant, talented, and how do we make sure that we tap into their genius? All of our students are smart. All of our students have gifts and talents. The question is, how do we tap into it and how do we optimize their potential, right? And how do we be anti-racist? Anti-racist is really speaking out against racism, taking action to talk about or call out racism in a way that is going to change the environment and talk about anti-Blackness. That is part of being related to the COVID-19 pandemic, being able to talk about some of the things that are really impacting our Black males, especially when we talk about school discipline. We talk about other policy measures that that prevent them from being successful. And then last but not least, empathy and compassion. I believe those are the foundational bricks to building strong relationships with our Black males, really understanding them, being empathetic towards some of the things that are happening, and then also being engaging with their families. One of the things that when we talk about the Black community is engaging with family, engaging with parents, engaging with other relatives who may not be related, but they are close in the community with these same students. So really being really immersing ourselves in our students to really understand them and to be able to help them to be successful. And I will yield it to the next person.
Awesome. Thank you so much. By the way, you better trademark adultifying. I think that's such a good term. I can't wait to use it.
Oh no, it's out in the research literature already. It's being used.
I know. I just want to make sure you get credit for it though.
Okay. So it's really how are we looking at kids as adults? We're treating them as adults for childish behavior or naivety that will already be experienced by a child anyway. So we're just magnifying it and making them
perfect.
Adults with
It's a great term. Thank you. Hey, Dr. Greg, you're up next.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. That was great information first. So a couple of these things I've probably already mentioned before, so I'll be brief. The first one is how important it has been this year to serve students holistically. Think about Maslow's hierarchy. So coming from a college access standpoint, we're always thinking about how we're going to get these students to college, what's their life going to look like after high school. But that may not be the world that they're living in right now. That may not be what's most important to them today. So we have to think about their physical needs and their emotional needs and things like that, and make sure those are met before we can then have some of those other conversations that we want to have with them. And that would be the case with both the students and their families. The next thing is, I know I mentioned this briefly, was about how important technology has been this year. Not just that our students have the technology, but they can use it, they know how to use it, they have the access. One of the things that came to my attention this year was calculators, for instance. We bought tons of calculators this year. Students use them for the regular classes, but also like ACT test prep and testing and things like that. What it seems like has happened in years in the past, you have students that in their families who are better off, that they have a calculator that they own, that they were using at home, they were very familiar with. You have other students that they could borrow one on the day that they're showing up for the test. And so they're spending 10 minutes of their testing time of a very short, sometimes like for the ACT, it might be an hour-long test on math. They're spending 10 minutes trying to figure out how to use that calculator and things like that. So it's those types of things that we try to think about when it comes to technology, not just giving them the technology itself, but making sure that they know when to use it, how to use it, and that sort of thing. The next thing I would talk about is we've learned how important information is and where it is. So again, I talked earlier about meetings that we would sometimes have in the evenings and parents or families could not show up. So one of the things that we've done is tried to have different types of parent and family events, as well as events with students at various times and places and things. The other part of that is there's times they can't make those meetings regardless of where we put them. So we've tried to, so once we had them set up with technology and we trained them to be able to use it, we put resources where they could access it 24/7. So recording like webinars on how to complete a FAFSA. So if they can attend the live session on completing a FAFSA, they can click on this resource and they can watch a video, or they could see like a step-by-step PowerPoint on how to complete the FAFSA. The last thing that I would mention along these lines is we've realized this year that basically almost everything we've done in the past, we can do it virtually. Maybe not as well as we've done in person, but whether it's a virtual campus visit, virtual tutoring, virtual mentoring. We've had some schools that have been in person, but yet they couldn't have outside speakers. So they couldn't have an admissions rep from a college come to their campus, or someone from the career business or industry field come and be a guest speaker. But we can virtually bring those people into the school and have them speak. So things like that we just kind of had to do a lot of, as you've already talked about before, being really flexible this year and doing some problem solving to figure out how to still make this work. The challenge with some of those things is exactly what you talked about with those at-risk students, is those students that, even though we figured out how to make some of those things work virtually, the students who have not been engaged sometimes have been the students that we're most concerned about. And I will just say, we haven't figured that out yet either. We're here talking about it, but it's still very difficult.
Thank you. Dr. Owen.
Thank you, Dr. Gregg and Dr. Hines. You both shared a lot of really great information. There's only a couple of things really that I would probably add to all of the fantastic information you just gave. A lot of my work prior to COVID was really on looking at the issue of summer melt, which is students who've been, they're academically prepared, they've been accepted to college or university in spring of their senior year, but then they don't show up in the fall. And because of the nature of the work that we did with Summer Melt, it really led to a lot of understanding of what was working in the field, what wasn't working when we talked about virtual advising or using, text messaging to communicate to students, or really any form of technology. So I think a lot of folks started reaching out because they're like, all right, you've been doing this for a while with Summer Melt. How can these strategies be used, in a time of COVID? And so we have been working with a few school districts actually to use text messaging in a way that goes a little bit beyond just a nudge of information, but actually connecting with students. I just recently learned about a huge initiative that the Urban Alliance is doing with the CUNY system. They're actually working with about 4,000 students, and they're using their text messaging communication as a way to garner student voice. So it's more of a social justice initiative with a little bit of nudging of information, but it's like helping students to understand the system, helping them to understand how to navigate the system, and helping them to be comfortable giving them feedback about what's happening so that they can change what's happening for students on the ground. And then I thought I'd just mention really quickly, we just recently were awarded funding from the Kresge Foundation to create a national survey. It's a national COVID survey that will develop basically student archetypes that will be able to know different categories for why students are making decisions during a time of COVID, whether is to postpone, take a gap year, whatever their reasoning is behind maybe not going to college, or where they're shifting in going to work. If they're going directly into work, what does that look like? What kinds of resources do they need? What kinds of jobs are they going into? And so we're really excited about that. We'll be piloting it here in San Diego in the next couple of months, and then we should have it ready to go out nationally in the fall. So you'll have my contact information at the end. If any of you are interested in having access to this survey and being able to use it with your students, we are doing this for a national purpose, so we want to get it out there. We're also going to be developing resources and tools based on the findings from the survey for practitioners to say, okay, here's what we understand and know about what's happening to our students, and here's how we can help practitioners to give them tools to be able to support them. So this is coming to, we're working on it right now. So excited about that.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Yes, we will. So a couple people have asked in answer to a few of the questions that have come up. One, we are recording this and we'll have it up on our website, probably either by tomorrow or Monday at the latest, so that you can review it and share it with people. And then two, we are going to put some contact information up for our panelists. So I know a few of you have inquired about getting in touch with some of our panelists about some of the things that they've discussed, and we'll put that up as well at the end. Wondering now if I'm going to kind of combine two questions and let you respond to whichever one or both you feel most inclined to respond to. But the two things I wanted to get your insight on is, one, what can we do right now to better support and utilize our counselors and other school staff as a resource in helping our students with post-secondary opportunities. And then two, the pandemic has really shown us how important it is that we be almost like aggressively creative in coming up with solutions and responses to challenges. What are some things we can do to respond to that call for creative, decisive, and equity-focused solutions as something going forward? Let's go, Dr. Greg, Dr. Owen, and then Dr. Hines. And this will probably be the last thing we have time to hear a response to, and then we'll wrap it up after that.
Thank you very much. And I'll be quick. I know we're running short on time. I'll look at the first one about counselor and faculty and staff support. One of the things that we've realized this year during the pandemic, as many people are physically separated, is how important it is to over communicate. Whether that's phone, whether that's email, text, so many different ways of social media and apps and everything else that we use now. But the importance of over communicating and repeating things over and over again in different ways and different mediums. The second thing, and I'll talk about a couple different aspects of this, it is creating and expanding that college going culture in the school, which should not be the role of just the one person that's a school counselor or one principal that this is part of what they do. It needs to be a school that gets behind that as an entire system. So in order to do that, one of the things that we've done is created like FAFSA teams or FAFSA committees at our schools. We've created college access teams. We've created steering committees that this is their role. And there's different people involved in these. Sometimes it would be a school counselor, but it would be teachers from different areas. It would be someone from CTE, someone from English, someone from math, someone from science, someone from different grade levels, things like that. The last thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes under this is how important it has been from our perspective with Gear Up. We realize how busy and how hectic this year has been for school counselors and for our faculty. So what we've tried to do is the types of college access work to make it really easy on them, or easy as we possibly could, is to kind of already package and put together a lot of those resources and then put them in a place, again, whether it's Google Docs, on a website, whether the resources are already divided by subject, they're divided by grade level, but whatever we want their support in. If I talked about a college going culture that we want in the school, the part that we want them to play in that, don't expect that they're going to spend another 5 or 10 hours a week on top of everything else that they're doing to create that. Provide those resources where it's kind of out of the shelf, off the box. Here they go. They can do it in their classroom.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. I'm going to give you just one follow-up question, Dwayne, because I realized there may be some people on here that don't have the familiarity with Gear Up. We've been doing work for almost 20 years now, and we've done a ton of work throughout the country and seen some incredible resources that have been taken care of under the Gear Up umbrella. If somebody is interested in getting a little more information on that, where would you tell them to go for more info regarding Gear Up?
Your timing is perfect there in that. So again, it's a U.S. Department of Education grant. They're 7-year grants. A state can apply for a grant or partnership grants, which means a school system or an institution can apply. The U.S. Department of Education will most likely have the next round of Gear Up competitions around the middle of March. And that's on their website.
This is the perfect window if you're looking for something like that. So I would definitely recommend looking into that. Thank you. Let's go Dr. Owen and then Dr. Hines.
All right, I'm going to share my slides and I'm going to try to talk really fast. So I'm going to answer the second question, which really is about what we're doing. And we have actually decided to kick off a national campaign. It's called College Counseling Now. I'm almost thinking folks might think that's a little misleading. We are really focused on, during this time of COVID, how are we going to support students in their post-secondary attainment, whether that's college or career, what does it need to look like? So we have launched a website, we have a blog that's going with it. And the reason that I want to share with you is because there are a lot of ways for you all to be involved in this. And we're really hoping that some of you on this call will decide that this is something you're passionate about, that maybe you have a few extra minutes that you want to be part of. I've listed some of the ways here, but I want to more specifically go into a couple of them. So we are looking for educators. all kinds of stakeholders, parents, students, K-12 teachers, administrators, counselors, who can write about the experiences of navigating post-secondary during this time of COVID. And so if any of you are interested, maybe would like to write this in collaboration with some other educators, have a topic that you think is really important that you want to know if we could reach out and get folks to write on, would love to have you participate in that. I just wanted to share like some of our blogs that have gone up already have been on how to navigate financial aid during the pandemic. What do we mean by college counseling now? We had a group out of Riverside, California, talk about what they're doing directly related to COVID and how they're supporting their students. Eric actually has a blog coming out today. We were hoping it was going to hit before our webinar. It's probably going to hit in the next hour or so, and we'll share that. But you can submit a blog. You can actually just go straight online and submit a blog to us, or you can reach out by email and tell us something you have interest in. We've also created on the website a list of resources by state. This is an interactive map. You will be able to click on it state by state. It starts with all of the college and career readiness standards and competencies for each state, and then the resources. So it's going to be documenting what's happening in each state as a result of COVID, directly related to college and career readiness. And this will be a resource for you, but we're also saying if you're aware of resources in your state, please let us know. We're also going to connect professionals in the state who are doing this work so that you will have access wherever you are to know who's really engaging in this. This is just an example of the California site. And you'll see it's got the standards and the competencies, and then we'll have resources for students and for families, and we'll have one of these for every single state. The other thing is, if you want to be in a webinar with us, we're going to be doing a lot of webinars on different topics. So I want to encourage you, if you have a topic, again, that you're interested in, please reach out and let us know. We want to lead this with the voices of the folks who are engaged in the work right now. Our fear is that we're going to hear, oh, we need to form think tanks. Oh, we need to conduct research. Oh, we need to do all these things. They're going to take multiple years to figure out in a time of a pandemic. And we have students and families who need help right now. So we want to really reach out to all of you. Here were some ideas for some potential webinar topics, but you might have some other ones that are fantastic. Here's an example of one that's happening next week. We're really excited about this. Ian Levy is doing work on bringing hip hop into college and career readiness. And it's a think tank just for anybody who wants to come. And then I did want to share, we are affiliated with the Journal of College Access. There are 3 special edition journals coming out in the next few months. College Access and Success for Undocumented Students, Access and Blackness, Anti-Racist College Counseling Advising, Equity-Based Career Development and Post-Secondary Readiness. And then Eric and I are working as co-editors on a new book that should be out this fall. It's Equity-Based Career Development and Post-Secondary Transition. So for those of you who I saw in the chat who were saying, what about career guidance? We actually have some fabulous authors who have written for this book. We're so excited. We think it's going to be a practitioner tool that you can use in really thinking about post-secondary advising. I tried to do that really fast.
That was awesome. And Laura, if you don't mind, maybe pop some links into the chat. People have been asking about those. And then Eric, just for your information, the beauty of the webinar format is we kind of make the rules. I don't mind if we go a few minutes over. If people have to hop off, we are recording it, but we still have quite a few people on that I think are interested in any resources or ideas that you have. So take the time you need, Eric. Don't feel like you need to rush it too much.
Okay, so let me share my screen one more time as well. I think so. I won't say anything that is innovative or creative. I think it's just the things that we already know, and then how do we use them? So I think one good example in terms of being able to work through the COVID-19 in the post-secondary environment, particularly for our in-service educators, is connecting with your local college of education and working with professors, working with faculty members who are not only doing the research on some of this stuff, but also teaching the pre-service educators as well. I always say that sometimes it seems to be a disconnect between higher education or the ivory tower and K-12. So how do we strengthen those relationships? And how do we continue to work together to solve the problem? One thing that we do need in higher education is to be in connection with our practitioners on the ground who are doing the day-to-day work, so we can continue to not only inform our pre-service counselors, but we're also, or pre-service educators, but also being able to talk about real world challenges that are happening. I know I've been in higher ed for almost 10 years, so I haven't been in the school full time for a long time. So I think that's one big piece. And then we also have interns, which I know some of you all probably use now, that will be able to help inform and innovate on the ground too, what is actually being researched in at the university level. The other thing that I want to talk about is just kind of a refresher on what the role of the school counselor is. And, you know, if we can support school counselors, one of the things to actually know is what do they do? Because the question I get all the time is, so what is a school counselor? Or they use that naughty G word, guidance. We always say guidance counselor. Guidance is not the word we use anymore because school counselors are more comprehensive in scope. They do more than just guide students and talk about career pathways, but they help close achievement and opportunity gaps. They collaborate with families and schools for student success. The other piece is that we do provide short-term counseling services. So that if there are students that are having some issues, we can use a triage approach to ensuring that a lot of our students get the help they need. And if it's long-term that's needed, we could refer them out. One of the things that we're teaching our students here at Florida State is learning their community, doing a community development map. So what are all the resources around a particular school that could be used by not only our faculty or our colleagues, but also by our parents and the community. And the other piece that I want to talk about too is that school counselors are in a position to advocate for all students. So although there may be a concern, we talked about the racism and the anti-Blackness, consult your school counselors, because most of our school counselors have been trained or at least taken one course in multicultural counseling, cultural responsiveness. And again, we're getting more into specialized approaches of not just a one and done, but continually doing the work of examining ourselves and how our beliefs and biases may impact our classroom or our education spaces. So that's all I have here. So thank you so much, Jason.
You bet. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you were able to share that with us. All right, last question, and we're going to wrap it up. This will be a quick one. It's my favorite question to ask our guests. Always want to end on a great high note. I just want to go around the horn and have you tell me what is giving you hope right now. Let's go, Dr. Owen, Dr. Hines, Dr. Greg. Just tell me something that's giving you hope right now.
Aside from vaccines, which is giving me hope, the fact that we're actually addressing these issues that have been needed and necessary for way too long. It's overdue. And I think that the pandemic drew attention to disproportionality all over the place and inequity. And I have hope that large enough groups of people understand this now and see it as an imperative that we have to address. And I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Hines.
That we still have individuals who are still interested in education, that still love the field, that still want to make an impact. I can tell you this, we've seen increases into the 100s in both our school counseling track and our clinical mental health counseling track, which signals that, you know, there are individuals who want to step in and help other individuals during the pandemic and post-pandemic. They see a need that we're going to have to help our country heal 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. So in a sense, there are individuals who are ready to put their boots on the ground and say, hey, how can I make sure that our country and then globally that individuals are being helped as a result of what's happening now? So that gives me hope.
Awesome. I love it. I'm over here cheering. I love it. Thank you. Dr. Greg.
I would just echo really what Dr. Hines said. I mean, the educators and the school counselors this year, this has just been such a trying year. And time after time again, they have risen to the occasion and done things that I'm sure in a million years they never thought that they would be in those situations and they would do. And they did so with masks on and smiles on their faces. And you know, whether it's school visits, I mean, home visits and those types of things, making sure that students have food, things that as a teacher, as a school counselor, you didn't think you would be doing, but they've done it because it's so much more to them than a job. It's a purpose, it's a calling, and the passion and the way they serve these students has just been outstanding.
Awesome. Thank you. The thing that's given me hope is how inspiring it is to see my colleagues in education really band together. When Dr. Hines mentioned compassion and empathy towards students, I'm seeing educators offer that same compassion and empathy to one another as well. And I think if we keep doing that, you know, we're going to make it. Laura said, we've got the vaccine coming out now. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We've got a lot of work ahead of us and it's going to be tough, but the greatest people in the world still get into this world because they want to help. They want to help kids. They want to help individuals. And that gives me so much hope. So let's just conclude. Huge virtual round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for bringing your insight and your authenticity to the message. And thank you all to our attendees for joining us on this. I'm going to put up a slide with contact information and play us out with a little music. And just thanks again, everybody. So glad you could make it. Awesome.